Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about bringing the Habitat Depot on-prem in the enterprise. To kick it off, let's talk about why we might need this and some things to consider as an enterprise when you would like to bring the depot on-prem. The enterprise is a complex place. Things like public cloud or public artifact storage aren't always available, or there's lots of red tape to be able to bring these types of solutions. So bringing the depot on-prem is the only viable solution. All organizations work in different ways. And to be successful as teams, you need to work together or different, but you really do need to work towards a common goal. Also, as we have procedures like separation of duties, we kind of need to think about all these processes that are currently in place and kind of work towards a solution with those. So just for separation of duties, just to explain a little what that is, it's like the same people that write the code aren't the people that can promote that out to production. Sometimes this is a legacy process, but sometimes there's other reasons that can't happen. But I have good news. Habitat has a solution, and we'll go into detail on some patterns around how as an organization you can be successful and tactics we've employed in the enterprise. So what we'll be covering is 4 main topics and that we've seen come up repeatedly when we're looking at bringing the depot on-prem. The first of those is habitat origins and channel patterns, and we'll touch on 2 main ones that we've seen in the wild with our customers. We'll move on to single depot versus multi-depot and what that actually means and why you would consider either one of those. Then we'll put in all these solutions into practice and work through some CI/CD pipelines and talk about governance. Finally, what we'll do is we'll walk through how we've made the depot highly available and which parts we were able to scale and which parts we weren't. As we cover each of these items, I want to go over the patterns that you may be able to employ and the pitfalls that you might consider. So you might be thinking, who's this guy and what does he know about the enterprise? Well, hi, my name is Skylar Lane and I'm a Senior DevOps Specialist with Indellian. I've been involved in a number of Chef implementations, including Chef Infra, which is traditional cookbooks, as you saw the rebranding this morning, InSpec-specific projects, as well as Habitat as of late, including one of the largest implementations to date. So to dive back in, first we'll talk about some origin and channel patterns that we've seen. As a quick refresher and to level set a little bit, if you're not familiar with Habitat origins, you can kind of think of them as a workspace for your application. And you can think of channels as the environments for those applications. And that's kind of the context that we'll be involving here. It's important to consider how your Habitat origins and channels are going to work within your organization. This will help best determine your ideal depot setup, as well as how you promote your applications through the pipeline. This is really looking at how the people and process work today and how they need to work together in the future to support your technology strategy. So to start off, you need to really align how your applications and product teams work today for you to get the most out of your implementation. So here's just a couple questions that might help you point in the right direction. How do your applications and product teams work today? Are they mostly independent? Do they work as larger teams, or do they come together with lots of communication, or is there little to no outside communication? How do you release your code? Is there a global release team, or does a team member act as a release engineer, and does that swap out as you perform releases? How do you want to release code? This is a really important one because as an enterprise, you might have legacy processes today, and it's really important to look to the future on how you might want to implement those in the future. All the answers to these questions will help impact what type of strategy you choose. So there's really 2 main strategies that we like to talk about. The first is organization-based origins, and the second is product-based origins. Starting with organization-based origins, on the far left side here in the dark orange, what you can see are 4 origins: developer 1, developer 2, and 3. These are your traditional local dev kind of origins where you'd have what you've signed in with the depot before. This would be that kind of origin. The one at the bottom, my org, is a company global origin. So for example, we would have an Endelian origin, and we'd build habitat packages for that origin, and then all the channels are the things to the right in the light color orange. So as a developer, you might have unstable, stable, to kind of work through the iteration process in local dev. And then for your company origin, maybe what you'd have is like a dev, a QA, staging, or production. In any case, all of the organization origins should always be controlled by CI, and we will definitely talk about pipelines later and what these look like. So in this case, a single origin to manage the promotion across environments really kind of standardizes this release process, and it kind of narrows that gap to production. A downside is that it can cause bottlenecks since it is centrally managed, and sometimes that might not work out. What we've found is this is great for small, medium enterprises, where there's lots of cross-team communication and cross-team functionality. In a product-based strategy, application and product teams are really the focus here. So as you can see from the previous slide, we carried over developer 1 and developer 2, still your traditional local dev kind of origins. We've also carried over the organization in this case, because you still do want that code reuse and being able to push Habitat packages that are more generic and general for your organization. But squashed in the middle are 2 product origins. What these represent are things like COTS applications, like maybe Symantec or HashiCorp Vault or whatever. This allows you to control the release process for your different products. Sometimes that is definitely very different. Sometimes you only have a dev or prod. Sometimes you have a bunch of environments. It really depends. And this allows for you to control that release cycle and release pipeline. It also decentralizes and pushes that kind of burden on the product teams. And sometimes that can be a downside. But what it really means is that you need to trust your product teams. Also, what we found is this works great for larger enterprises or those that are further down the journey, their journey with Habitat specifically. Now, I can't exactly speak for Chef, but if you look in the public depot, what you can see is maybe remnants of this. So if you look, they have their core origin, which has all of their shared packages. Then you have the Chef origin, which have some of the Chef products and Chef client in spec as well. But then they have the Habitat origin, which represents all of the Habitat packages needed to deploy the Hab depot itself. We'll talk about those packages later, but you can kind of see that maybe that fits a pattern that's kind of like this. So just to quickly go over and recap these strategies, for company origins, because all channels are available to everybody, it kind of really helps that release pipeline and narrows the gap to production. You can really look to all of the products that have gone through the pipeline before, and you can kind of see what worked for them and what didn't, and then you can help kind of harden that pipeline over time. This works great if you're not managing hundreds of thousands of applications across your organization. It definitely simplifies the release process. As your business scales and the amount of applications and pipelines to the same channel can cause bottlenecks, right? You're always going to that one company origin, promoting out to the same processes, and then you might be forfeiting what your actual pipelines could look like, trying to make it something that it could cause those bottlenecks, right? At which point you might want to consider product origins. For product origins, because every team is managing their own origin, it does allow them to move and promote independently, but we still promote the usage of a company origin so that you can have those standard packages, because cross-team collaboration is definitely important. A downside of this is that each team does have to manage their own origins and their release pipelines, placing a burden on them, or potential burden on them, which typically makes the solution better for larger enterprises or those that are further down the Habitat journey. So now that we've talked about origins and channels and what kind of strategies you might want to go with there, let's talk about where we store those artifacts, and that's in the Habitat Depot. There's really two main architectures that we like to talk about, and that's the single versus the multi-depot. As you can see, this diagram kind of outlines what a simple single depot strategy with only a single production depot. That line that you see represents a synchronization process, so you really need to look at how do you get those core packages on-prem and how do we build out our Habitat packages. So looking to the public to pull down and synchronize those packages, and we'll talk more about what that package synchronization could look like. What this works well for is if you don't have to be onboarding thousands of applications, there's really no issue of stability or rapid scalability or tons of releases and package sizes that are really crazy. This works really great because you do only have to manage that one instance, whether that instance is HA or whether it's just on a single instance, traditional, like what you see potentially in the on-prem depot repositories. And if you're comfortable with all of your production artifacts, and with being next to your development artifacts, sometimes that's not something that's available, right? So what this diagram outlines is what a multi-depot situation might look like. So this kind of supports maybe air-gap-esque type deployments because your production depot doesn't have to have egress to the public. It kind of proxies through a non-production depot. So really your package synchronization is from public to non-prod, and then your production will synchronize from non-prod to prod. And what this really allows for is various levels of governance. So I will talk about one strategy where you can just synchronize everything that's on a specific channel. But what you can do is have proxy accounts in both of those depots with different auth tokens, which have those proxy accounts have access to all the same origins. And then what you can do is define access control around who can promote to specific channels in production and who can't. And this is really where multi-depot strategy shines, is in this governance. But it does come with drawbacks, right? You have to manage multiple depots. You do have to manage whether they're HA or not. It can get complicated, and I will definitely show you what that might look like. So to go into detail about that synchronization process, we've developed a Go binary that ships as a Habitat package that will help you synchronize. So if you look on the first left side, this is still that same process that this is what you see from the previous slide on multi-depot. You have packages from non-prod being synced from the public. And what this is verbatim with some configuration changes, but really this is the user toml or configuration toml that you'd be providing to that Habitat service. So you can see that there would be a sync interval of 300 seconds or 5 minutes. The upstream in this case would be the public builder. Our target builder in this case would be non-prod. And our auth token would need to have access to the origins defined below. And what that is an array of maps in toml, and it really allows you to define multiple arrays so that you can define which origins and which channels you can promote to. So in this case, what we're synchronizing is all of the core packages that are on the stable channel. On the second side, in orange, what we have is very similar. Interval 300, 5 minutes. Our upstream in this case is now non-prod. So we'll be synchronizing packages from non-prod to production. Our target is production, and we need to have that auth token in almost every case. Well, actually in every case, you really should have different auth tokens and different users to be able to upload to production, right? In this case, we're also syncing the core stable packages. But like I alluded to on the previous slide, one way that you can one way that you can release your packages to production is by having that origin there called MyCo. That would be your company origin, and synchronizing all the production packages. So when you upload a package to non-prod, promote it to the production channel, what would happen is then that package would be synchronized out to production. And we've open sourced this packaging process. If you want to have a look, it's on the Indeliant GitHub. If you do have questions or want to dive into the code, you can feel free to ask them or come by our booth and we can go through the code if you'd like. So now we know a little bit about Habitat origins and channels and how we would bring the depot on-prem in data center or cloud, public cloud. Let's tie in some CI/CD and make this feel a little bit more real. So what we have here is a pretty traditional CI pipeline. App teams work on features in local development on their laptops using source control. Hopefully you're using source control at this point, and making those pull requests to be able to have that audit trail of who made the code changes and who's reviewing those pull requests and allowing those merges. And then CI is used to build, upload, and promote those Habitat packages, in this case out to non-production. All of those packages that you are building definitely need to be pointing at your non-prod builder or depot. Sorry, I forgot to clarify. I sometimes switch between builder and depot. They are the same thing. I think the technical name is Chef Builder Depot. But really, they need to be built against non-prod so that you can verify that all of your artifacts and your dependencies are there for when you upload. So for any Jenkins users, we've also created a Jenkins plugin that helps ease some of those operations. We can also dive into that code if you'd like. To pull in governance into the equation, what we like to do is add in RBAC or directory service so that we can have that audit trail of who is building those Habitat packages and who ran those jobs, who ran those promotions, and then we can use RBAC to define who can promote and who can access certain areas. This allows for that setup that I was talking about where we have the two different auth tokens and two different proxy users, each with those different auth tokens managing the same channels and being able to promote separately. And really this is an example of how that would actually work. So again, in local development, you're building your Habitat packages, writing your code, committing to source control, or maybe even just testing on your personal origin, as you can see across the top, building those Habitat packages, loading them on VMs, testing them out, going through the unstable, stable process, trying to figure things out, then pushing them through your pipeline, as before, building, promoting, uploading those packages to non-prod. And then really what would happen here is rather than using that synchronization service to pull in those production packages for that origin, what you then do is set up those ACLs to be able to say, these people can promote to this environment. And what that would really do is ensure that not all of your artifacts in development make it out to production, and you really have defined those process there. But you definitely still need to run that synchronization process from public to non-prod, and then just define those channels and origins like core or Habitat to make it out to production. Didn't realize that was kind of cut off on that side. So in order to make the depot production ready, now it's time to look at high availability. And really when it comes down to it, what we're looking at is making the depot itself highly available, all of its various services, and then getting into the nitty-gritty of doing the synchronization process across multiple depot instances in potentially different data centers or different regions in AWS. So to talk about what the services are inside the depot, really starting from the left side, we have the depot web, which is an API proxy, with Nginx app serving a web UI that you've seen when you log in to builder.habitat.sh. Then you have an backend API, which services those Hab CLI requests. Then that has a data store, which is a Postgres database, Memcache to cache those database requests, and then your actual artifact storage, where all of your heart files are stored. That uses S3. And in the case of on-prem depot repo, it's funny, you have Minio stored there. So really, if we want to talk about it in terms of Habitat, what you have is the web UI bound to the Depot API to be able to determine how those requests get routed. And then you have configuration for what the data store, where the data store is, where the memcache is, and which artifact storage to use. The reason we didn't scale memcache in this case is without specifically modifying the builder code, adding other Habitat packages for caching operations like cache expirations, which version of memcache has the right cache, it gets very difficult. So we tried to scale out what we could with what we had. Moving into what this would look like, whether you're using single depot or multi-depot instances, this was what, specifically what this would be is a single instance. So when you're spinning it up, you might have three servers. You could have more or less. So for example, on server 1, what we have is the API proxy, which is Habitat Builder API proxy. Then you have the API, data store, and memcache. And then on the other servers, what you have is those pieces that we're able to scale. Now, to talk about artifact storage, it's really important to think about where your HA solution could lie. So, for example, where some places that we've stored are using Dell EMC's S3 solution, as well as Amazon S3, but you really could use any S3 solution. I don't really have experience scaling Minio in that way, so I don't particularly know how to do that. Another service I failed to mention is a load balancer in front of the web proxies. So for global load balancing and determining which depot to hit in your different data centers. So now let's put it all together, and I did allude to something being complicated, and this is it. I promise this is as far as it goes. So like before, app teams work together on features in local development, using source control, making pull requests, reviewing pull requests, and having CI build and upload those artifacts. Again, using the depot that you're going to, for example, non-prod, to be able to ensure that all those dependencies are there, and then when you upload that, or when you go to production, that there's no surprises. The sync process between non-prod and public stays the same, as well as between the instances in that data center. So non-prod and prod, they kind of stay together. Where it gets a little bit trickier is when we start having those start having that synchronization process between those data centers. Excuse me. So what you see is that really non-prod syncs from non-prod, and likewise the other way. Prod syncs from prod, likewise the other way. Really what this allows for is to guarantee that all your artifacts make it out to production, and each of those eventually consistent, right? Some problems that you could potentially run into is that network connectivity gets dropped, but Habitat is smart enough not to know to update when it doesn't have the thing to update with, right? So if you don't have a new release of the Habitat package in the bottom prod, all of those prod instances aren't going to update until network connectivity is restored and you have the connection between those. So in all of this, no matter what origin strategy or depot architecture you choose, what I really want to highlight is Habitat is extremely flexible. Really, like we started off with some less complicated ideas, having a single depot instance, loading it on a single instance, maybe not having an HA yet, or going into some complex details of package synchronizations between data centers. It really is flexible, and I believe it's an amazing product. So now I know that the thing that's standing between you and the party is me, so I tried to make this really quick. So let's sum this up. When bringing Habitat Depot on-prem, it's really important to think about origin and channel strategies, because those really do affect how you will be making it out to production. Catering your pipelines to address governance within your organizations allows you to do things, some really cool things like adding ACLs between different between different depots and defining which packages can make it out where. In this specific case, it's also really important to focus on the artifact storage, specifically the S3 solution, where, this is where all of your underlying data is going to be stored, and it's really important for production readiness. With this being said, I do know that someone very important is in the room, and they've been working very hard on not just using S3 backend, but also using things like Artifactory to wrap up the APIs and be able to not use this kind of solution, but to be able to use Artifactory. So when it comes down to it, selecting your multi-depot or single depot strategy also depends on the way you'd like to use Habitat in your organization. The architectures that we've outlined are single and multi-depots, or those depot acting as a proxy. And finally, Habitat is ready for the enterprise, and we're using it out in the field with our customers. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask away. And these are the Git repositories that I was alluding to. And finally, just before the questions, if you do want to dive in and you don't want to ask the questions here, come talk to me at the booth. I'll be at the Indelium booth right after this. Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you.
Thanks.
Regarding the integration with Artifactory, I think I saw that come across the Slack channels as an alpha right now.
Mm-hmm.
We use Artifactory as a service in the cloud, so that I'm assuming that's probably a no-go since we don't have direct access to run all the scripts to enable that just yet.
I'm really happy you asked that. I haven't worked too much with Artifactory, but I can definitely look into that and we can chat about it later.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Thanks for the talk. Very, very, very informative. In the complex synchronization slide, can you go into a little bit more detail about two of the aspects of it? First, what provides the synchronization between data centers? Is that the Habitat sync script?
Yes, that'd be the Habitat synchronization hab service.
And is it smart enough to pick up anything that was missing when a network connection was down, for example?
Totally. So really what it does is it determines the packages that it knows that it has in the target and what packages are in the upstream. And then it does a diff to determine which packages it needs to upload. So every interval, it will check the diff. If anything is not in the target, it will download that and upload it accordingly.
Okay, so it won't just check since the last time I ran, but the totality of the differences.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and then the second question is, in that HA solution, if the server to which the CI is pushing, if that server is down, whose responsibility is to repoint CI to the other server? Is that Jenkins's?
Oh, for sure. So what I kind of allude to, but we probably did fail to mention, is that you'd want to have a global load balancer pointing to either one of those data centers. So then it'd be the load balancer's responsibility to determine which depot to upload.
So you'd have a load balancer block in between those. You wouldn't have one pointing directly to the builder, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you'd use DNS with that load balancer to determine which depot to hit.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for the question.
One thing I wasn't clear about, the sync script, does it rewrite the origin, or is it just copying to the origin with the same name? I wasn't sure on that one.
Yeah, so it doesn't rewrite the origin, it just kind of copies.
Within your multiple depot data center replication, that 3 that you had highlighted, is that based on ring at that point and gossip, or are we
You totally could.
saying it's isolated, and how would you take care of it if it was isolated data centers for some reason? Say like FIPS compliance.
For sure. So in that case, well, for sure. So using rings, you definitely could do that. But what we've done is that it really depends on the actual target and upstream, the actual URLs. But in the case where you're talking about isolated data centers, I would capitalize on that. Instead of using a global load balancer, I would use CI and directly inside each one of those data centers. And the promotion, the upload jobs would upload to each one of those independently. In non-prod and then in prod, you'd synchronized to the one recording.
What kind of value has being able to bring Builder on premises like you have provided for you or for your customers that you're providing solutions for?
For sure. Thank you for the question. Really, the value is having it on site and being able to, work within your organization, work behind the proxies, and not really have to worry about which artifacts are out there and was that an accident? Should it have actually been on a private origin instead? Oops, I just showed everybody my code. But it allows you to not worry about those kinds of things and move faster, right? Thanks.
Skylar, one more follow-up on the sync script. Does it handle re-signing and keys? So public builder, each individual builder, does it re-sign the artifacts? Does it
No, it doesn't.
does it maintain the signatures? What happens?
Yep, it maintains the signatures. So it downloads, that's a very good question because I didn't actually say that. But really what it does is it downloads the keys for that origin first, uploads all the keys to the target, and then does all the packages accordingly. So it does not re-sign the artifacts. It ensures that the keys are already up there first before it does the packages.
Hey, Skylar. Great talk as always. I wasn't clear on that one slide where you were talking about directory services for a couple of things. First of all, directory services, when you implement this for your customers, are you using their existing Active Directory or LDAP? Are you building that as a service? And also, could you clarify too, when we're talking about directory service, we're saying actually to either to Git or to the pipeline tool, but not to the Builder Depot.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. So really the directory service is tied to the pipeline and the CI tool that you're using. So we could be using existing Active Directory or something like that to be able to integrate, and maybe you already have that in your CI tool, and it just really capitalizes on that. And it really doesn't have anything to do with directory services for the actual depot itself. Does that answer your question? Thank you.